Now we continue with our program. I would like to welcome to the stage Michaela Vatcheva, who is a photographer and visual storyteller. Her work has appeared in a number of international publications, including the New York Times, LA Times, Der Spiegel, among others. And she will tell us a little bit about how personal story and experience has shaped her reporting and helped her build empathy when approaching sensitive topics. Michaela.
Здравейте.
Good morning.
There's somewhere where I can get to it because I get very worried on stage. Okay, so I'm going to tell you today a little bit about my work, but actually most of the work that I do now is in the realm of photojournalism, and most of the work I'm going to talk about is from my previous life as a filmmaker and a multimedia journalist. So the beginning, my origin story, so to speak, in journalism came from my birth story. I was born in 1986 here in Sofia to a Bulgarian-Turkish family. And at the time, we had something called the revival process, which meant that my mom, giving birth to me, had to change her Turkish name into a Bulgarian name just a few months prior. And she had to select a name for me, which was a Western name, which was allowed in a list of appropriate Western names, because Turkish names were not cool. So that was just a part of a trauma that kind of defined a lot of my life. These are some of my ancestors, my grandfathers, my great-grandfathers on the left, and my great-grandmother and my grandmother on the right. I don't know, yeah, your left and right. But basically, the way that I survived this trauma, or the way that I lived through it in those early years, was by becoming assimilated into Bulgarian society. And many might think assimilation is a good thing. See, you're successful, you graduated from a good school, you went to the US, you know, things are going well for you, you have a nice career. I have had a sense of lack of belonging that's been pursuing me my whole life, because I don't have anything in common with the people you see in the pictures. I don't speak their language, I don't believe in their faith, I don't know the way they lived, and we basically share just blood. And that assimilation was a violent process that I had to realize for many years. So basically it took many years of me hiding and living in Bulgaria, kind of basically in the closet. And then I grew up, I moved out of Bulgaria because Bulgaria kind of meant nothing to me. It didn't feel like home. And in the process of living in Germany, France, the UK, and then finally the US, I learned that there's something wrong with the idea that I should be ashamed of my roots, that I shouldn't speak the language of my ancestors. So this trauma started to become kind of untangled. And slowly I started coming out to people, and slowly I started understanding that there are a lot of people around the world who have gone through similar trauma that I can connect with. And once I can connect with them, we can tell our stories together. And once we can tell our stories together, we can begin to heal. So this is how this all started. When I moved to the US in like 2010, 2011, I was already sort of, I was a visual storyteller for the commercial world. But I found a job at PBS, and PBS was struggling with finding new audiences that would kind of engage with their content, which was severely white and older. And I tried to pitch them that they should let me do stories about marginalized communities or minorities. And they were saying, like, what do you have to offer that we haven't done before? So I said, just let me go to an indigenous tribe and see how I connect with them. So they let me after a lot of talking. And I ended up in the Oneida Nation in Wisconsin, where I had done a lot of research about how you show up in their homes. I brought sage, and I did not bring a camera. And we spoke for a few hours about why I wanted to be there and how I wanted to connect with them. And the first thing that I did was actually share with them my story of state-sanctioned assimilation, my story of not knowing my ancestors' language, and they cried. And I was like, I don't know if this is going so well. But then they said they cried because they went through a similar thing. And because they went through a similar thing, they felt a responsibility to their ancestors, to their community, to their living community, to tell their story. And they knew that I was the right person to entrust this story with. So when I was listening to our previous panelists and debating in my head about this idea of not going too far when you connect with people, I struggle with this too. And I struggle with it because I connect with people deeply and openly and vulnerably and willingly. And I think for me, the journey was much more about finding that border, finding that that enoughness, saying, we don't need to go there. We don't, like, how deep into the trauma do we need to reach for this specific story, and being responsible, being a good steward of everyone's emotions in the room. So I did a big multimedia project about underrepresented communities and their foods and how they express themselves through foods that showed that Wisconsin was anything but white. Or not anything but white, but it was definitely very diverse. And the project still exists. It's been ongoing for, I don't know, since 2018, however many those years, that's 6 years. It got some awards and stuff. But in the process, I learned something about using my empathy, and I want to tell you a little bit about this film that I made where a lot of these skills came in handy, so to speak. The Safest Place is a documentary, a 20-minute long documentary about fentanyl poisoning. So it's not about overdose. It's not about people who have issues with substance use. It's about middle-class children who basically decide to buy an OxyContin pill or some other kind of experimental pill on Snapchat, on social media. They're little kids. They buy a pill, they pop a pill, and from the first pill that they've ever tried, they die in their living room. So in this case, this family shared with me, me and my co-director, the story of their 14-year-old son to whom this happened. They lost him when he was 14, and his sister and his mom were becoming activists, connecting with other parents, asking Snapchat for accountability for the drug market that they were providing. The process of untangling this story and dealing with it in a trauma-informed way for me meant many months of building trust with the family. I knew that the mom had gone already on all kinds of media and had told her story, and to her it was she was numb when she was telling this story. So she had no problem talking about it. The question was, how were we going to get an authentic story out of her? And the other thing was, how much of this connection, how much of this trauma did we need to unearth with his sister, with his surviving sister? A lot of my, I did this film as part of my journalism studies at Berkeley, journalism school, and my professors were really adamant about me asking Eden, this, at the time, 13-year-old girl, to recount the moment she found her brother dead in his bedroom. And I refused to do that because I really thought that it was enough to hear about these things from the mom, who was prepared, who had chosen consciously to be an advocate. And I didn't think that the sister or these friends needed to relive the trauma. Of course, I asked them about life before the traumatic moment, life after, but I really protected the sister and the other children who were participating from having to relive the trauma. Similarly with the mom, I kind of asked her, I guided her gently to share as she was ready. There was a process of sort of like during the interview, we did sort of an on-ramp with questions she was comfortable with, things about the communities that she's found since becoming an activist, other bereaved parents. And then I let her just speak about what she had experienced. And I sat with her and I did my best to not focus on my own emotion, but to hold space for her. And then, after like an hour-long interview, I offered her, of course, breaks, which she refused, or, she didn't want to get out of the moment. I also gave her an off-ramp of that interview. So there was another set of questions that was related to, I can't remember, something that she had more control over. So she got to start the interview feeling a sense of control, and to end it in this way where she didn't have to be left raw to continue with her day, to continue as if nothing's going on. Okay, the camera's off, pretend that, your son didn't die. Another specific moment that I remember as we were preparing for this interview was that my co-director had written some questions, and the fact that I was a mom, I was a new mom at the time, really helped me empathize with the trauma she was going through. The questions contained small references to the fact that she's a mom of one, and because her other child has passed away. But as a mom, I understood that once you've given birth to two kids, like, you're always going to be a mom of two, regardless of whether or not your other child has passed away. So, I mean, this is a luck thing, maybe, but what I'm trying to say is maybe a little plug for parent journalists, because we do bring a lot to the table. Yeah, so this project was, in many ways, a project where I had to bring empathy, but also kind of really a lot of time, a lot of the resource that was required to do this in a way that was comfortable for the mom and for the child was that we took a lot of time to get close and to build trust and to make sure that they did not feel like we were extracting. And the mom did say later on that after this project, that this was actually the most healing time that she has ever told her story. Okay. I have a few more stories to show you. These are some photos from my work as a daily photojournalist, news photojournalist. And I do that, I've been doing this mostly in San Francisco, where we struggle with houselessness. A lot of unhoused individuals live there. And we occasionally get assignments to photograph this very important problem that we're dealing with in the city. And what I'm about to say about this, the way that I work with unhoused people has to do with a lot of privilege that I have as a US journalist. And with the way the industry is there compared to here, and I don't want to judge anybody. I want to say that I completely understand that the resources are not the same here and there. But I'm hoping that as we strive to work in a more trauma-informed way, that we can ask for these things more and more everywhere. And the main thing is that when a photo editor calls me and asks me to do a daily assignment in a unhoused people's camp, I don't agree to do these assignments. I don't take these assignments if they're only a single day assignment. I ask for time to be able to build a relationship with people, depending on the story that they're asking me to do. So if the story is something like, it's been raining a lot in San Francisco, how are unhoused people in this neighborhood keeping their tents dry or their belongings dry, or are they at all? I know I'm gonna have to go inside their home. And I know that there's a lot of stigma connected to that. They don't know me. So I ask for at least a couple of days, at least a couple of opportunities to go into people's community, for them to get to know me, for me to get to know them, and for us to be able to bond before I ask, can I go into your house? This is the home of Toro. He was a former art history teacher who lost his job and ended up in the streets of San Francisco, something that happens quite often, unfortunately, in our city. And I arrived at Toro's, I went to Toro's house like 3 times, but in addition to that, another really good thing was that there was already a writer that I was working with, who I met there the first time, who had already built his own relationship with this person, so I was able to be introduced by somebody else. A really big deal when you walk into a community and you know you are other to that community. In other unhoused people's stories, as I spend more time, I also get to see how they care for each other, what care looks like. And that allows me to give a more nuanced sort of representation, which I think is really important when we, like, this is what empathy looks like giving more time and giving more nuance to the story. And this is how the story of Tracy ended up being portrayed in the paper. She was assigned to me as basically, this nuisance in this rich neighborhood by the beach. And there are these drug addicts who are living in this beautiful community. So are the citizens who live in this neighborhood right to be upset? And what I saw when I went there was that Tracy was very much keeping her neighborhood safe, clean. Yes, she was a meth addict. She told me she was a meth addict because it was easier to find meth than food sometimes, and meth was helping with the hunger pangs. So as I stayed with her, I found out that she had this hobby of, is this golf? Yeah, golfing. I suck at sports. So She shared with me her hobby, and we ended up doing a few, well, I followed her for like 2 hours on these dunes on Ocean Beach, and this is what ended up being the portrait of her story, which I'm really happy about, and she was really proud of because she was able to show it to her grandson, who does not know that she's unhoused. And then the last set of stories that I want to show you guys is actually from Sofia. I reported on the anti-LGBTQIA laws that, and the protests that cropped up recently, and I was taken aback by the fact that a lot of the colleagues who were reporting on this, and again, I understand that this is a different infrastructure and a different system, and everybody's in a rush and everybody's trying to file first. But the way that they were photographing these people who are, you know, I feel like some of the last generations who are going to go protest willingly and show their faces and their bodies as a form of dissent. They were photographing them secretly. You know, they were showing up, not asking anyone about their names or pronouns, and kind of taking a photo off the hip. And the first thing that I thought about was, what if these people are not out to their families? Do we have a responsibility as journalists to know who can be shown and to what extent they can be shown? So I basically showed up early, before anyone had arrived at the protest. I introduced myself to the first protesters, and then they introduced me to the next protesters. By the time the protest started, I knew everybody's situation. I had written down their names and their pronouns and what can be shown of them. And when this protest finished and when the stories came out in Balkan Insight, some of these folks messaged me on Instagram to say, I have never dreamt in my life that somebody in Bulgaria would ask me for my pronoun and for permission, for consent to be in the media. These two young folks had serious I didn't get their consent before I took their photo because it was kind of spur of the moment and I hadn't met them before they showed up in the middle of the protest. So this is how I deal with this. When this kind of thing happens, I see a photo that I really like, that I really want to file. I use my network to find these people online. I found the people. I asked them if I can use their photos. They said no. And I said, can we talk a little bit about what worries you? They said, I don't know you. So then I said, yeah, that's normal. I'm a journalist and also not a very famous one. So I showed them a little bit of my work in the LGBT community from the US and from here. And I gave them a complete freedom I gave them the control. They could choose not to do this. I didn't push them at any point, but I explained that it's really important that they do consent and that I do want to put their names, the names that they want to be represented by and their pronouns in the article, and that I really believe that, you know, they're doing a great job of showing the cause. So they took 24 hours to think about it, so I missed one of my deadlines and I didn't file this photo, even though, you know, personally it hurt me a little bit. But what I do when that happens is I share it with a couple of photojournalism friends and I say, hey, there's a good photo that's never going to see the light of day. And they say, yay, we love it. And that's how I get my ego boost. But then I don't file the photo. And then they came back and they said, okay, we've talked about it. We want the photo to go out. And luckily I had a second deadline with this outlet, with Balkan Insight. And when I filed it, I had no idea that Balkan Insight would choose it as their main photo, but that's how it turned out, and they were super proud of it. Yeah, one thing that I also try to do is explain to people exactly where their photos might show up. Since I was shooting for Bloomberg for one of the protests, I explained to these folks. They were actually more amenable in some instances, knowing that their photos may not show up in Bulgaria at all. But it was important to explain that these photos might show up anywhere in the world. And this person on everybody's left could not show their face. So the photos that I filed were only the photos that kind of made them unrecognizable, and one of them ended up in the news in Australia, in Sydney. Okay, I have a few more photos to talk about, but if we're out of time, we're not going to talk about them. So ask me questions later, and thank you for the attention.